This is the Outlap F1 podcast featuring America's own Cody, Andy, and Deanna. Your one-stop shop for Formula One news, insights, race previews, and reviews. Join us on the Outlap. A venue trying to put on its one last show, the local hero. We got to talk about the ups and the downs of his weekend and playing peekaboo with rain all weekend. You could kind of sort of say the Dutch Grand Prix had just about a little bit of everything, the ups, the downs, the ins and the outs. You have found the Outlap F1 podcast. This is season 8, episode 20. It is that 2026 Dutch GP review show. You've got Andy. I'm along with Cody tonight. Man, oh man, I felt like tired after just watching it. Cody, how's it hanging and how you doing?
I am doing well. I thought it was a really fun race weekend. Good way to get back, even though for us it was at the ass crack of dawn, at least some of the sessions. But yeah, I thought we'll get into it. I thought that the sprint race was really boring, and then everything happened during the regular Grand Prix, and yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, we will get into a lot of different things in tonight's program. But if you found our show, welcome along. As always, we are glad you are here. You can find us on X, Instagram, Discord, Reddit, and of course here on YouTube at Outlap F1 Podcast is the handle for all of that. If you enjoy what you're seeing, and I will do video for the review, and you enjoy what you're hearing, if you're on your favorite podcasting app, do us up, or if you're on YouTube for just the audio, do us a solid. Click the like or subscribe button, or if you're on your favorite podcasting app, a 5-star review will definitely help us come up a little bit better in F1 related search results for content like this. You can email the show, outlapf1@gmail.com, or get your thoughts to us. Thank you so much for Outlap F1 Nation, who continue to help support our endeavors here. Thank you so much to Dean Warwick, Yuri Dolchester, Paul Weaver, Quentin Warden, Kevin Kelly, Regan Stanzik, Timothy Brown, Jonathan Scott, Rachel Fleming, Dave Doherty, and Brandon Bowler. If you'd like to join that esteemed list, Lord knows we are right in the middle of the European season, and God knows we need coffee. So go to our link, buymeacoffee.com/outlapf1. You can leave us a little gift there if you'd like to do that. Do you have to? No, of course not. We're just happy that you're listening. But we'll put our link in our show notes, like I said before. This was a coffee drinkers weekend for sure. All right. Well, first thing, before we even get into the Dutch Grand Prix, we didn't get a chance to do this because in true Outlap F1 podcast fashion, 3 hours too late to break the story, dang it. Literally 3 hours after I posted the preview, we got the news. All the Red Bull fans out there can take the big sigh of relief. Max Verstappen ain't going anywhere in the near future. He is locked down for the long term, a contract running at least, as is reported, till 2030. Cody, we talked about this ad nauseum. Where was he going? What was he going to do? We've seen him in all sorts of different uniforms. Turns out none of that was ever really a possibility, at least according to all the actual official media. You got to be feeling good for this one. What's your thought?
Yeah, I think it's really good that you're going to continue to have that pairing. I feel like Max Verstappen being outside of Red Bull would feel just as weird as, or if not weirder than Lewis Hamilton leaving Mercedes to go to Ferrari. So I am happy he's staying there. I will be even happier when Red Bull has a better car to give him. But yeah, it means that I don't have to feel weird about wearing this red hat to support Max Verstappen, at least for several more years. And yeah, it's good to know that he's going to be sticking around in the sport, because to me, the bigger fear than him going to another team was him just saying, I did everything I wanted to do and just hanging up the F1 suit and going somewhere else. So yeah, this is really good. And I look forward to him hopefully doing better next year.
Yeah. I mean, I think we talked about it a few weeks ago, or right before the break, that the one headline that Red Bull as a company had wanted, they just got. Max Verstappen signs not only just an extension, but a long-term extension to stay there with the team. He's got all of the resources that team can pull together. He's got it around him. I think the relationship between him and Mekias has been pretty positive for the most part. Max has been a lot more understanding of issues with the car. We're not getting other than the downshifts, which he does not like at all. I can't really fault a lot of what he said because I think a lot of it's actually pretty true. He's been very forthright in his answers. So yeah, I mean, it's a huge domino. Now take that off the board. It's kind of weird. We got the Williams dominoes before this one, but there was kind of a rumor mill building that this was going to be when he was going to announce it. And then, of course, like I said, 3 hours too late for the likes of the two of us. I literally nodded off after I posted the episode. I woke up and my phone had exploded. And I posted right away. Like I actually got up and went to X and put the posts out and, did our best to try to do it the right type of coverage. But yeah, I mean, like I said, it's a big domino off the board. I think what you're going to have is this round of driver market is going to be one of the more boring ones because it sounds to me like the Williams one was one of the more interesting ones. Like maybe there'll be some changes there. I'm betting other than maybe Alonso if he decides to give it up, or Hulkenberg if he decides to call it a career. I don't see a whole lot of other movement because these are now all the big dominoes are where you would have expected movement to happen have not happened. It's not going to happen, at least not for 2027.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, that bit of news is now out of the way. We have now given that the appropriate treatment. Back to the Dutch GP. We'll restart that with our headlines of the day. Cody, what do you say?
My headline of the day is McLaren's pace was no fluke. We saw McLaren come back after the summer break, still very strong. They weren't able to get the sprint win, but they were able to get the Grand Prix win with Lando Norris in relatively convincing fashion, I would say. That's the upside. On the downside, I was looking at the points gap to the lead and how far we are into the season, and all I could think was it's just like 2024. They've got the car now, perhaps, to compete, but it's too late. I think even if they do become the dominant car throughout most of the rest of the season, even with how well Kimi Antonelli is still doing, I don't see them overcoming that gap to the lead.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. I mean, I have some thoughts, especially concerning the next round that I shared, and that I think will be kind of poignant. But we'll get to that point. My headline of the day is always the hard way. I guess that's just how Lando Norris does his thing. You could look at the headline and you could say, in the Grand Prix, Lando Norris got the pole, Lando Norris got the win. Oh my God, that had to have been a boring show. If you're a Lando fan, that's just not how it goes. We can't ever have it be nice, straightforward. Or even when we do, it's very, very rare. It's not to say that it never happens, but he didn't make it easy on himself yet again. Some of that was circumstances he could control. Some of it the circumstances that he couldn't. But he managed to get the job done. It is now 2 in a row for the defending champion. And now we kind of have to see where this goes. I think we are approaching an inflection point in this season where it's either going to be McLaren are just going to try to win races, or McLaren are going to try to possibly get back into this. There is still a big gap. It's a long gap. It's going to take basically what Max did last year to happen again. I don't know if it's going to happen. We're going to we'll talk about it when we get near the end of this. But before we do all of that, we have a lot of sessions to get through. This was a sprint weekend, and there were lots of things happening. So we'll rewind all the way back to Friday with the sprint shootout and the sprint qualifying that saw. All right. The upgraded Honda engine and the updated Aston Martin, at least early, didn't look so good. P22 was Fernando Alonso in the sprint shootout. P21 was Sergio Perez. P20 was Valtteri Bottas. P19 was Lance Stroll. P18 was Carlos Sainz. P17, Ali Behrman. P16 was Alex Albon. P15 was Esteban Ocon. P14, Nico Hulkenberg. P13, Franco Colapinto. P12, the subbing in Yuki Tsunoda in the Racing Bull. P11, Liam Lawson for Red Bull, not making Q3. The top 10 from 10 to 1 was P10, Arvid Lindblad in the other Racing Bull. P9, Gabby Bortoletto. P8, Pierre Gasly. P7 was Lewis Hamilton. P6, this was a shocker for me, Max Verstappen in the Red Bull. P5, Kimi Antonelli in the Mercedes. P4 was Oscar Piastri in the McLaren. P3 was Charles Leclerc for Ferrari. P2, Lando Norris. And P1, it started really well in the weekend early. George Russell in the Mercedes. Cody, big thoughts from the sprint quali.
My big thought here was that it looked like some of the gaps, at least at the front, are starting to close up a little bit at this point in the season. We've got what is it looks like at least in this session, the first 4 drivers all qualifying in Q3 within a tenth of each other. So it is nice to see that gap starting to close up and get a little more competitive. Obviously, yeah, I was disappointed with Red Bull and how they were performing, but it feels like this season Red Bull's kind of a crapshoot. Like some weekends they're right there, they're running at the front, they're competing for the win even occasionally, and then other weekends it's just like this one where they're at the back of the forefront teams, they're quite a ways off from the qualifying pace, and they just kind of meander around in that 5th, 6th, 7th position unless some miracle happens. But yeah, I had a feeling that this might happen, but it's disappointing all the same.
Yeah, I mean, you try to figure like the tracks that I think Red Bull go really well at. I think my guess is they will probably look better in Monza. They seem to like really have nailed down, and I think that Macarena wing design that they have helps with this a lot. Tracks with long straights. This is not one of them. This is very tight, very twisty, a lot of high speed and then some slow speed corners. Not a whole lot of mid speed corners here in Zandvoort. So yeah, maybe just not working to that car's strengths. You look at the top 3, it is the 3 big hitters, Russell in Mercedes, Norris in the McLaren, and Leclerc in the Ferrari. Yeah, really nothing in it when you really look at it. I mean, you're talking less than a tenth. Like that, I think was the big headline from the sprint shootout. The gaps are almost back to where they kind of were at the end of 25, where it was like, okay, it's the slightest differences in the laps that are kind of determining who is getting those positions. And George Russell came out on top, and good for him. He needed to do it early. Antonelli being in 5th kind of opens the door a little bit, at least in the sprint. And, I'd hate to say that the most probably disappointing qualifier of the big teams was probably Hamilton in 7th. You weren't necessarily expecting that. We knew Ferrari had brought a lot of updates, but with only 1 hour of practice and again, playing peekaboo with the rain literally came right around the session. It started before and then it dried out and we thought maybe we were going to see it running. Nope, not on this one. So, not to be. So it was a dry session, and George Russell came out on top. All right. Well, we will move from Friday to Saturday. And Saturday, it was really, really, really early. And I was kind of, what did I do Friday? Oh, I was maybe out a little bit on Friday or something. However, it was a later night for me. I knew I was going to be having some issues potentially making the sprint. So I set an alarm. And I'm like, okay, I'll put 4:35. That should give me 25 minutes to get ready for the sprint. And I don't know if I was so far asleep that I slept through that entire alarm, but I never heard it. And the next thing I know, I woke up and it is 5:01 a.m., which means the sprint is literally about to start. And look, you can criticize Apple TV for a lot of stuff, and it is not as easy as just going to your cable and punching in the channel. But you can easily find it, and you can do it in a quick bit and get right into the live feed. And thank God for it, because I ran out here, I grabbed my iPad. I'm like, that'll be my timing screen. I used my phone to do the onwards, didn't do any of my normal setup. But I made the sprint with literally about 30 seconds to go because they were on the formation lap. So I did get a chance to watch the sprint live and then promptly went back to bed afterwards. But that sprint saw All right. Your one non-classified finisher in the sprint turned out to be Nico Hulkenberg in the Audi P21 and P20. Sergio Perez for Cadillac and Carlos Sainz in the William in those respective positions. P19 was Valtteri Bottas. P18, Fernando Alonso. P17, Lance Stroll. P16, Alex Albon. P15 was Ollie Behrman. P14 was Esteban Ocon. P13, Yuki Tsunoda. P12, Franco Colapinto. P11, Liam Lawson. P10, Arvid Lindblad. P9 was Gabby Bortoletto. P8, Pierre Gasly. P7, Lewis Hamilton. P6 was Max Verstappen. P5 was Oscar Piastri. P4, Kimi Antonelli. P3 was Lando Norris. P2, Charles Leclerc. And it looked pretty easy from the front. George Russell, certainly dominating the early part of the weekend, takes the sprint relatively easily. All right. I would just say the big takeaway from the sprint was not a whole lot happened. But Cody, did you have other thoughts?
Now, I'm trying to remember here. Was it the sprint qualifying or the sprint race where the rain came in literally as they were finishing?
This was the sprint race. The rain came in
that's what I thought.
Literally as they were taking the checkered flag.
So we'd been talking during the preview about how unpredictable the weather can be, and that the fact that the weather forecast seemed to indicate it was going to be cut and dry, that it might not be the case, and it wasn't. The rain decided to show up just literally like a minute too late for us to have a very exciting and chaotic finish.
Yeah.
George Russell pretty much went over the line to clinch the sprint win, and then it started to really come down. And man, like if it had just come just that one lap sooner, who knows what could have happened? It could have been nutty. My man Max might have actually won it. Who knows? But that part was a little disappointing. That we had the chance to finally see some wet weather running out of these cars, and it just came a little too late. Other than that, I thought the sprint was actually pretty boring. There wasn't really a whole lot of overtakes. I guess this track at Zandvoort is pretty hard to overtake at. It looks cool watching the cars go around it, especially through those banked turns, but it is hard to do overtakes. There's not really a lot of long straights or really heavy braking zones. There's only two straight modes at this circuit under the current regulations. So the main place to really try to make an overtake is at the end or down the main straight. And we saw many drivers trying to do it, getting close. And I really think there was only like one major overtake, and that was
there were two.
Past Lando.
Yeah, it was Leclerc getting past Lando, and I think it was Antonelli getting past Piastri, or late. And the themes, at least the takeaway from the sprint, was McLaren were good in one lap pace, but were clearly suffering some tire deg. I think it was Leclerc that was on softs, and it was kind of surprising how well the Ferrari had kept the softs alive throughout the rest of the sprint, because you were expecting fall off, and then it seemed like it was more affecting the McLarens more so than a lot of the other in the top the points finishers for sure. Notable finishes: Gabby Bortoletto getting a point just outside the points, unfortunately. Pierre Gasly got the point. I know Alpine had brought a lot of updates to this track, so that was significant for them to get back into that midfield fight. Not a lot of overtaking, I would say, was another theme of the sprint, and mainly because I think everybody was trying to play kind of nice. You got qualifying in 2.5 hours, and nobody wants to be the guy or the driver that has to go and face his team and go, we have to rebuild the entire car. Nobody's eating lunch, and we don't know if we're making it out for qualifying. It is probably my one issue with kind of how we do this format. I don't have a problem with the sprint race being in the morning or being the first session of the Saturday, but it does tend to mean that I think more drivers are going to be risk adverse versus risk or sending it like they definitely were doing when we get to the main race on Sunday. You also have the issue of, and it's just the nature of the content that you get. they only had the sprint and the sprint quality to talk about. So for 2.5 hours, all you heard was, oh my God, McLaren are in so much trouble. It cost Lando Norris 1 championship point. Now, I'm not going to say that every championship point isn't valuable. Last year proved that more than enough. But it's not enough to really have the sky is falling reaction as well to it. So, yeah, I mean, I didn't think this would, when they come out with who's getting a sprint, this wasn't a track that I thought, oh, that needs a sprint. It's nice for the Dutch fans to get an extra meaningful session. I guess it's fine. But these can be so hit or miss depending on the availability and the way you want to pass and how risk adverse or how risk, sensitive a lot of these teams are. And I think first race back after the break, nobody wanted to go banging wheels with each other. And, I only saw a couple of moves. So, yeah, I mean, it's probably an issue. I don't know I don't have a fix for it. But if you're going to do the sprint weekends, you got to have tracks that are good to overtake. Otherwise, it just doesn't seem to work. All right. Well, we ended the sprint. We open up park for May. Teams get to make changes, and then we graduate to the main qualifying for Sunday's race. And that qualifying session saw. All right. P22 and P21 are occupied by the two Cadillacs, Sergio Perez, P22, and Valtteri Bottas in P21. P20 was Ali Behrman in the Haas. P19 was Lance Stroll. P18 was Fernando Alonso. Still not feeling the Honda updates at this point. P17 was Carlos Sainz. P16 was Alex Albon. P15 was Esteban Ocon. P14 was Franco Colapinto. P13, Nico Hulkenberg. P12 was Yuki Tsunoda. P11, Pierre Gasly. And again, P10 was Arvid Lindblad. P9 was Gabby Bortoletto. P8, Liam Lawson in the Red Bull. P7, Max Verstappen in the other Red Bull. P6 was Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. P5, Lewis Hamilton in the other Ferrari. P4 was Oscar Piastri in the McLaren. However, that's where the 2x2 stops because we have P3, Kimi Antonelli in the Mercedes, followed by P2, George Russell in the other Mercedes. But P1, just eking it out, less than a tenth in it yet again. This time it is Lando Norris in the McLaren taking pole. All right. Cody, big thoughts here in the main quali.
I was very excited to see Lando Norris get back on pole, starting in the front. Apparently, they found a little bit of pace in between the sprint sessions and the regular qualifying. Also kind of interesting to see George Russell continuing to outperform Antonelli throughout all the sessions up to this point. No magic changes in pace for Red Bull going into the session. Sometimes they kind of suck in the sprint and manage to figure things out in time for the main sessions, but that wasn't to be here. Liam Lawson did, however, perform a little better in main qualifying, and sprint qualifying, we didn't really talk about it. He actually didn't make it into Q3, and he split the two racing bulls of Lindblad and Tsunoda, who we also haven't talked about up to this point. Was kind of having a decent middle of the road, I guess, weekend, especially for someone who hasn't been in the car so far this season. This time, Lawson picked up the pace a little bit, was able to get in Q3, qualified 8th place right behind Max. I guess the main story here is that you didn't have a Mercedes on pole again.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I think the lap times got faster. I think everybody found something. We went from a 1:11.5 to a 1:11.1. So 0.4, which in Formula One terms is actually pretty big of a gain. So everybody kind of learned a lot, I think, from the sprint and from that sprint running. And yeah, I mean, I think the last runs in Q3, Norris kind of went out and set the benchmark, and it was kind of like everybody else. He did not have the last run of it, so he didn't like take it at the end. And I think it ended up being like Antonelli took it from Lando, and then Lando took it back, and Russell slotted in at P2 and just missed out. Again, very, very tight. You could see some differences in how a lot of these cars were trying to make lap times. I found it actually very interesting. Lando was making a lot of his lap time in the first and especially in the second sector. So I think what we're learning, at least about this version of McLaren car, it seems like they've gone back to where the high speed corners and the twisty bits seems to be where they're going to try to make their mark. Where they were lacking was especially in the third sector, and that's where Mercedes and Ferrari were catching back up. So when you would do it kind of the intro lap, Lando would get out to the lead, and it was just get the third sector right. There were several laps that he would do where he would jink a little bit, and it would cost him 3 or 4 tenths in that third sector. So it came down to a very fascinating tale of who's deploying where, and maybe it's fascinating to you, maybe it's not. But I found it interesting just to look at the sectors as to who was making their lap time respectively where. So that was kind of an interesting thing in the main qualifying. Big sticker, again, we talked about, we didn't know what Aston Martin were going to look like. And it looked like until they got to the main race, they weren't looking so good because, according to everything that I was reading about was still going on, Honda engine was very, very rattly. And it was the same problem like when they were starting over. So they brought more power and it made the car shake again. And so we had to figure out ways to get the car not to do that. So I think that's kind of why you're seeing Stroll and Alonso. They did improve. They got past the Cadillacs. They were not dead last. But that was not what I think what a lot of Aston Martin fans were looking for from the big Honda update, at least early. Notable performances, I would say, again, go to Bortoleto and Lindblad in the Racing Bulls and the Audi, respectively. Pierre Gasly just missing out on the top 10. Definitely, Alpine felt a lot better about, I think, their car in general, at least over at this track, because they were definitely looking a lot more competitive there in the midfield. All right, any other big thoughts before we move on to Sunday?
No, I'm ready for the race, and I'm ready to rip off the Band-Aid.
All right, well, so again, we were playing peekaboo with the weather. We did this the entire weekend, and we get to Sunday, and I wake up and I like to watch the drivers' parade. Formula One, if you don't know, puts on their social media the drivers' parade pretty much free to anyone. So if you're on YouTube, you can find it. You're on Facebook, you can find it. You're on X, you can still find it. It's one of the few things that still works on X live. It's amazing. And if you have a phone, you should be able to find this thing. So I opened it up and I'm watching the driver interviews, and it is bright, sunny, blue sky. And I'm like, well, okay, we're out of the rain danger. We should have our normal one-stop race. And I was wrong. I was very, very wrong, because we get to the recon laps an hour later and the clouds had come and the sea did its thing and sucked up the moisture out of the sea, and the clouds just got heavy and chucked it down over Zandvoort about a half an hour before we were supposed to go, before the lights were supposed to go out. So the recon laps to the grid were all basically on intermediate. Max Verstappen actually went out on a set of full wets. So we had a full wet sighting in 2026 for a recon lap, if nothing else. It showed up on the timing with the blue W on his timing screen there for a minute. And it looked like all of the prep was going to be, what tire are you going to run? But also what is characteristic of Zandvoort, once the rain stops, it usually is very windy. And that track, I think more than any other track, it can get very wet there, but it also dries out faster than a lot of other places that Formula One goes to. And that's what was happening. By the time we got from the recon laps, which is 40 minutes to lights out, to the first formation lap, which is 2 minutes before lights out, the track had effectively dried. And even the FIA said, we're going back to normal grip conditions. We're going to enable all the straight modes. So all of the buildup of, my God, we're going to have a wet session. Sorry, folks, you came up for nothing. And we didn't have it.
It evaporated.
Yeah, literally. Yes. Our wet hopes literally evaporated in the warm. It wasn't even warm sun. It was just sun there at Zandvoort. So that led us to the first formation lap and the first start of the race. And normally we have to talk about the back markers and we have to talk about the big one because it caused a red flag. Max Verstappen and Gabby Bortoleto on the end of the first lap Both went for a bit of a spin. Max definitely got the worst of it of the two. Bortoletto did a 360 and was able to continue. Max was unfortunately not so lucky. He goes into the wall. The car gets crunched up. His front tire, however, did make it across the line. I saw a caption of somebody said, if your front tire makes it across the line, do you get scored a lap? Apparently no, according to the
Nope.
FIA. But yeah, Max was out. I saw his name tumble on the timing and I just went, oh no. Oh no. Cody's going to get so. I don't know what happened yet. I thought it
It
was maybe
didn't.
an engine thing. Uh-oh. What'd you
It,
see?
it didn't sting as much as Monaco.
Okay.
That one was more frustrating, but it was. I mean, I guess like I was kind of thinking, well, they didn't look like they were going to be that good this weekend anyway, so whatever, kind of. But yeah, he gets going off. So like that first start ended up being a little hairy. Had a bunch of guys bunching up going into that first turn. Max ends up actually going like kind of halfway off the track, manages to pull it back together. But then yes, most of the track was dry, but the half of the track back where you have that final turn coming into the main straight, that was still fairly wet, and that's a pretty high speed area. It's banked turn,
Yep.
and I guess yeah, Max was just really trying to gun it through there and trying to regain from a poor starting position, and it just hit a part that was a little too wet or too slippery. Loses the car at high speed, slams into the wall. Pretty much destroys the car. Um, Pretty much acknowledged that it was on him right away, which yeah, it was. And but yeah, when I saw the car, it was funny because you can see it on the broadcast happen.
Yeah.
Like they're showing the main straight, and it was kind of frustrating because you have the big,
Yeah, there's the banner.
Rolex thing that goes over the main straight there, and you see in the background all the smoke and the parts flying and stuff. And I was like, oh shit, who is that? And you kind of start to see that it's a Red Bull, and I'm looking at the timing, and like I saw Max going down. I was like, son of a bitch. But yeah,
Yeah.
so that sucked. And yeah, Gabriele Bortoletto spun pretty much for the same reason, but he was luckier that he didn't really run
He was
into
lucky for
anything.
two reasons.
Neither of them collected anybody, which was also very fortunate.
I mean, Bortoletto got extremely lucky. One, he does the whole 360 right in front of his teammate, and the only way I can kind of equate it is in NASCAR terms. You just saw a puff of smoke, and Nico Hulkenberg had to make a decision: do I go left or right? He went left, and that turned out to be the correct decision. And if he goes right, it's a T-bone, and we're talking about a whole different accident. All the way around. The best comparison I can kind of harken it back to would be, if you recall, Piastri's spin in the sprint in Brazil, where he was just that little margin of the tire going over that little bit of moisture, probably at the wrong spot, and it just sent the whole car around because there's so much force and counterforce going on. It didn't look like, now, I will give Max some credit in that when I saw it from his onboard, it didn't look like he was cheating. It didn't look like he was trying to get to the painted area and maybe take a 10th or something. He was holding very steady through it. It just looked like he came across to me, it looked like he came across a patch, the car lost grip, and at that point, then you're just a passenger, and there really wasn't anything he could have done. But nobody else was backing out of that corner either. I mean, Pierre Gasly had a huge jink but managed to save it. We talked about it. The Bortoletto did the whole 360 spin and survived. And Hulkenberg just misses him. But yeah, it was definitely red flag worthy. That was totally true, because there was damage, I think, to the barrier and stuff like that. It was surprising to me that they let the race continue for about 30 seconds after the crash. And then they put the red flag out. But I guess that again, I can't speak for race control. What they ended up doing was ultimately, in my opinion, the correct decision was red flag. So we stop. Everybody comes down the pit lane. We clean up the car. Max is, unhurt and okay. And I think that's the biggest positive from that entire situation. And then we that enabled some teams to do some swapping of tires. And then we started again. And this time, unlike the first start where Lando Norris got away clean because George Russell did not have a good first start, George Russell got bogged down. And if it's any other track other than Zandvoort, would have probably gotten a penalty for the block he put on Piastri. But there really wasn't anywhere for him to go. And I kept thinking about it in my head. I'm like, well, even if he doesn't do that, where's he going to go? He's going to go into the traffic. And so I'm like, as mad as I want to be about that, I really can't fault it. Like, he's defending his position, which he's entitled to do. So Antonelli was in second, and some of the order kind of got flipped around. The second start, Antonelli nailed the second start. We've always wondered, when were we ever going to see that inside line do exactly what Antonelli did, get to the apex at turn one and take the lead? That's what happened. So now our first foray, or our first segment of the race, has Antonelli in the lead with Norris in second, followed by, at that point, Oscar Piastri, who, remember when he would do the ballsy moves? It was back, at least early. But Cody, how'd you see the second start?
I saw it as a little disappointing because I was very excited about Lando getting off the line very well from the first start. And so, yeah, in the first start, you've got Kimi Antonelli starting in third, but he makes, I believe in that first start, he makes a good move on Russell, gets up to second place right away. And then when they did the restart, he gets by Norris and is right in the lead. And I was like, oh, God, like I thought we would at least have a couple laps before this happened. But then, yeah, he's back in the lead. He's doing his thing. And I'm thinking it's going to be, Antonelli romping off to another victory again. And as we saw during the race, it actually got a lot more strategy intensive than that. It did really end up kind of being a race of who was pitting when, who could, make the undercut happen and whatnot. And it ended up being a pretty exciting race. I would say less for on-track action and more for like the strategy considerations that went into it.
Because the consensus, at least according to all the stuff that I had read about it, was that they thought it was going to be a one-stopper. There's, dry conditions. You're going to start on mediums. You're going to run that 24, 25 laps, which is what the sprint was. And then you're going to come in and box and probably switch to the hards, and you're probably going to finish on hards. And that was going to be kind of without doing some on-track overtaking. That's what you thought you were going to get. Whether this was a function of the rain washing all the rubber off is something I don't know, but it seemed that everybody's tire deg seemed to be a lot higher. And we had some interesting strategies. One of which was Oscar Piastri going out on a set of hard tires right after the first red flag and making that move stick on a set of tires that you would not expect to be good early. However, even he was not immune to the deg monster and only managed to do a stint of 15 or so laps. And that was kind of the end of the good news for Piastri, because after that, it all kind of went downhill. There was a slow pit stop for him. And then he ended up on a second set of hards that he could not make work. And he was just kind of, eventually going down the field. So let's kind of go through where everybody finished, and then we can kind of talk about big picture stuff. Obviously, your non-classified finishers, we talked about Max Verstappen. What we didn't talk about was Ollie Behrman on the second start. And the first time they went to the standing start, could have been a royal hot mess. People didn't know how to line up. Nobody knew where they were. Nobody knew what the order was. There were cars all over the place. Sergio Perez was 3 rows behind, thinking that that's where he was supposed to line up. And the FIA, and meanwhile, Ollie Behrman's Haas is dying at the other side of the track. And so they called for an extra formation lap. So he ended up doing a third time around before we actually got going. And at that point, everybody lined up, and that's when Antonelli had gotten to the lead and all that other good stuff. But Ollie Behrman only makes it 2 laps. He does not finish. Lance Stroll made it 45 laps before they decided to retire his car. And Esteban Ocon, a bad day at the office for Haas all the way around, makes it 52 laps into the race. He does not finish. Your final non-classified finisher, it feels like we're leaving Cadillac out if we don't do it, but Valtteri Bottas decided to call it a day 61 laps in. Cody, you were about to say something. Sorry.
I was just saying, you missed one. We still got Alex Albon, who was also a non-classified finisher.
Yeah, no, well, we're not done.
Oh no, I guess he's classified, right? He's DNF though.
Yes, the Williams team decided to take their new contracts and decided to play bumper cars with each other with them. Apparently, Alex Albon and Carlos Sainz. Carlos Sainz is classified, but finishing 2 laps down. Alex Albon was not so lucky. They had a coming together of teammate on teammate drama, and there was a lot of teammate on teammate drama that we also have to talk about as well, especially over the radio. They come home P17 out, Albon with a DNF. Your first classified finisher is Carlos Sainz in P16. P15, the benefactor of all of that chaos, Sergio Perez in the Cadillac, one of their better finishes. Hey, look at that. P14 was Franco Colapinto, and P13, the heavily penalized Franco Colapinto, and P13 was Gabby Bortoleto in the Audi. All right, Cody, big thoughts. I think the Williams probably take the cake in big thoughts here in the back markers.
Yeah, I would say so. Like we already covered Max. Yeah, we already covered that Haas was having a bad day. All of the rare men not making it into the second start. Most everybody else that's down here, we're kind of expecting to see. Gabriele Bortoleto had the spin and all that stuff, so kind of makes sense that he might not be on performing for the rest of the day there. Franco Colapinto got a lot of penalties, and the Cadillacs are Cadillacs. So they're going to be right around here the rest of the season. Yes, the Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon figured out that they're both going to be getting paid and with the team through next year, and they decided that meant, okay, if we've got any like pent up frustrations or ego to take care of here, we're going to take care of it right now.
Yeah,
and they ran into each other, and I'm sure everyone back in the paddock was sitting there pulling their hair.
Yeah, it's one of those that I just looked at that entire incident and I just went, why? What were you going to gain? There was no gaining for either of them. They were not in the hunt for points at that point. You just had to wonder why. I mean,
ego. It's got to be that they want to, they both are sitting there going, I'm number one at this team. And now they've both got contracts and now they're trying to prove it. And it's stupid.
Yeah. So, I mean, it ended up resulting in a late virtual safety car, which enabled a lot of the front runners to get a cheap pit stop. So a lot of it ended up being a 3-stop race for a lot of guys because of that, as it turned out. All right, moving into the midfield, P12 is Arvid finishes. Arvid Lindblad finishes P12. Let me get that out correctly in the Racing Bull. P11, I think as a show, we should rename P11 the Yuki Tsunoda Memorial P11 Award. We should call it out, I think, every time from moving on forward, because he comes back for one race, and where does he finish? God dang it, P11. Yuki Tsunoda does it again. There's gotta be a stat about that. It's almost uncanny. P10, Pierre Gasly does get a point for the Alpine. Here's your other headline. Forget about the winners. Forget about the top 6 for a minute. Your headline in the midfield is Fernando Alonso on a long, hard tire stint strategy makes it work. 2 points, P9. He triples Aston Martin's points haul on the season and actually sounded positive on the radio. It was actually pleasant Fernando on the radio. It was crazy. What world are we living in? Fernando Alonso, P9, and scoring points for the Aston Martin team. P8, Nico Hulkenberg, big points for them. They come home P8, 4 points for Hulkenberg on the day. P7, we said this guy had to have a good weekend. I think overall, if you say P7 in the Grand Prix is kind of where we wanted him to be, we got it. Liam Lawson comes home in his Red Bull sub stint and brings it home in P7. So those are some good feel-good stories, I think, here in the midfield. Cody, what you got?
There's actually a lot going on in the midfield. A lot of it you already touched on. Very happy for Fernando Alonso to finally be getting some more points here for Aston Martin. It does show just how far they've come since the beginning of the season, that now they're actually getting multiple points. And you're having a happy Fernando Alonso, which is a rarity. I laughed my ass off when I saw that Yuki Tsunoda came in 11th because just like you, I was like, it's too perfect. Like, it doesn't matter if he's been out for, half a year or, whatever. He comes back and he's still in P11. Although I do have to say it's actually pretty commendable considering he has not been in the car
Yes.
half the season. He's coming in after the summer break, uh, fresh first time out, and it's a sprint weekend. So he's only got the one practice session before you start into competitive sessions. And all things considered, he actually did pretty well. He even finished ahead of Arvid Lindblad, his teammate, which I thought was very surprising. And then Liam Lawson ends up performing much better than he had done in these sprint sessions. It gets all the way up into 7th place, which, I figure is probably right around where uh, Isaac Hadjar would be finishing had he been in that seat. Now, I will say as well that he's, what is that, like
Almost a full
47
lap.
seconds off of
Yeah,
Oscar
he's almost
Piastri.
he almost got blue flagged. He almost, but
So, yeah, he finished in 7th and he got some decent points in the Red Bull, but he was pretty far off of everyone else who was in the front runners there. So, kind of take his performance there with a little bit of a grain of salt. But I mean, he got points. He did well. He did, I think, about as well as he could have hoped for his first time in that Red Bull racing car. And he faced the same challenges as Tsunoda in a lot of ways. Coming back from the summer break, car you haven't driven yet, sprint weekend, so you don't have a lot of time to come to grips with it. And yeah, by this point, he had at least figured it out a little bit.
yeah, I mean, I always just wonder kind of the logistics of that. Like, did they have to revive his overalls from last year or maybe remeasure him and get all that ready to go? Because, I mean, it looked seamless. Like, he was there on media day and he was in all the right uniforms and had all the right stuff and
Had to
looked
move
like
the
he
pedals
belonged
way up
there.
in the
Yeah,
car.
exactly.
He is not a very big guy.
No, but I mean, I'm sure that they probably had to have a seat fitting. I mean, that's probably something that they probably did right before they scrutinized the car. Yeah, but I mean, I think for a guy that had needed to have a positive, like now, at least if this is the end of his Red Bull official career, and Lord only knows, we don't know what's going to happen. It ends on a much better, less sour note than it did before. And maybe that leads to some sort of an opportunity for him later on down the line. I don't think he's a guy he's not washed, he's not finished. There's still potential there for something to have a very solid career.
He did do pretty much exactly what he needed to do in this race, which was to show that he's still got it and that last season is not really a good representation of his ability. Because he really had a rough time of it last year in the Red Bull.
It felt in a lot of ways that they almost set him up to fail. I mean, if you actually kind of like do a post-mortem on that, they were not putting him in a position to succeed as a team. And I think that's why you saw the results that you saw. But anyway, we'll leave that there. I'm glad he had a good weekend. I was happy for him. All right, your top 6. So this is where the fight at the front was very much back and forth between a lot of these guys. But it really turned into a 2-horse race kind of at the end of that first stint. Antonelli and Norris had kind of broken away from a lot of the other potential contenders. P6, Oscar Piastri, we talked about. He had the great move at the beginning. It was unfortunately not a harbinger of things to come for him. Very much struggling on the tires at one point, coming on the radio and saying, will somebody help me to drive this thing? Because he couldn't figure out what was exactly going on with the car. P5 and P4, we have to talk about the drama that was Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari team orders and Ferrari decision desk. It's back. Look at what happened. And it was delayed again. And everybody's pissed. We'll talk about those two. Another 2 drivers at least one driver who I think was a little bit more pissed off than the other one. P3 was George Russell, who got team ordered himself against P2, Kimi Antonelli, who was trying to win the race, but at that point, basically didn't have the pace, was good early, got the lead early off the second start, like we talked about, held Lando at bay, but Lando stayed with it and was basically able to use a elongated overcut strategy and some really good laps on a set of hard tires right before the second pit stop. Even though he didn't completely do it in the pit stop sequence, he had so much better pace right after that. He comes home second race on the bounce for Lando Norris, the defending champion. Cody, big thoughts here in the top 6.
I was happy to see the strategy battle go into Lando Norris's favor and see him come away with another win here. It's really funny how drivers' popularities kind of ebb and flow with what's going on in the Formula One world at large. We've seen Lando Norris go from being, the underdog hero to the, last year everyone thinking that he was, fucking up repeatedly, especially in the first half of the season and couldn't put it together, to becoming champion. And now everyone's like also happy that Lando Norris is winning again because he's not in a Mercedes. I do think it's really nice to see him having, I said this after the last race, it's good to see him having some good success while he is champion. There's a very, very good chance that he will not be champion after this season. And he's showing that he really does deserve to be champion, I think. And so I was very happy to see him come away with that. Big one here, though, is you had the story of the team orders. You had it for Mercedes. You had it for Ferrari. The Mercedes one was less frustrating, I would say, to see, although I think it was also kind of more bullshitty. Because
That's a good way to describe it. Because go ahead.
So you got George Russell, who has, he's running in P2, and he's obviously not got as good a pace as Kimi Antonelli at this point in the race. But we saw throughout the whole weekend it was not easy to pass, and he wasn't struggling that badly. At least against, Antonelli, I would say. So I think it would have been completely fair for George Russell, who is, let's be reminded, still competing for the championship.
Tied for P2.
Yep, tied for P2 now. Probably the biggest competition that Kimi Antonelli is going to have, unless, McLaren really keeps this trend going. But, he had, in my opinion, every right to defend that P2 and get those extra points. It's not like he was going to, probably screw Antonelli over. And even if that did happen, maybe he wants that a little bit. Regardless, Mercedes looks at the situation, they see the Ferraris catching up, and they see, maybe that, I don't even really know what they were saying, because Kimi Antonelli was in a better position to defend because he had the better pace and the better tires at that point. And it kind of really seemed like they were throwing George Russell to the wolves when they asked him to give up the place to Kimi Antonelli. So you're pretty much saying, we don't really care that you're competing for the Drivers' Championship right now. We just want to maximize points for our guy in the lead, I guess. And
right.
Yeah, it's just really wild. And we also need to remember that George Russell got really, really lucky that he actually finished third, because it looked for sure like he was about to be passed by Lewis Hamilton for that P3. They were literally coming around to the main straight, and Hamilton was right on his butt, looking like he was setting up to make that move.
Less than a second.
As all that's happening, you get the safety car, or virtual safety car. And that pretty much took all the momentum out of him, and therefore George Russell was able to hang on just that little bit more and finish on the podium. So, yeah, I guess it could have been a worse result for George Russell, and maybe he's trying to be positive about that he was still on the podium. But if I was him, I'd be pretty pissed behind closed doors about the way that Mercedes chose to handle that.
Yeah, and that's not their MO. That has not been the Mercedes ethos. Toto Wolff has said, that the drivers are usually free to race. And now we had our kind of first situation where Kimi Antonelli was a little bit on the back foot. He loses out in that hard tire flip-flop with Lando. Lando gets past. Lewis Hamilton had also extended his stint, and at that point was actually P1. Lando does put a really nice move on both Antonelli and Lewis Hamilton in that lap to reclaim the lead on the set of hard tires there. And then Antonelli's pace was dropping off. until there was that virtual safety car, and that allowed Antonelli to come in and swap off for a set of soft tires. And it was very just an odd thing. I was surprised because at that point, the delta was 12 and a half seconds with about maybe 13 laps to go. So, okay, you swap them, you put Antonelli back in second, and I think George was right to question it because what is he going to do? You think Antonelli's going to pull back? Yes, a set of soft tires, a second and a half a lap in traffic because we've got lap markers in between him and how he's eventually going to get back up to Lando. It just didn't make sense to me why you would choose to do that there. And then that sends the message to the Russell side of the garage, or the garage, if you're speaking British. Yeah, exactly. That, hey, this is now
Sorry,
Kimmy's
Rachel.
championship to lose. And despite George finding himself in an advantageous position to his teammate, to his championship rival, as much as you could say that there is one right now, it was a very odd call. I kind of scratched my head, and it didn't work. Antonelli really didn't close the gap to Lando. It ends up finishing 11 and a half seconds. So all of that kerfuffle cost George Russell 3 points, damn near cost him the podium. The only reason George Russell was on the podium is because the Ferrari screwed it up worse. Well, we're going to talk about that in a minute. Because if not for that, George Russell's maybe not on the podium, and the gap to Lando didn't come down hardly at all. So again, it didn't work in my opinion. But Antonelli gets 3 points back in the championship. Odd time to pull that card, if you ask me.
Yeah, it did seem like a really weird spot. Like George isn't out of it, so it didn't really make that much sense. But yes, like you said, Ferrari screwed it up even worse, and it just, I don't know, like Ferrari just seems to have a knack for making these types of situations like extra frustrating because we have an analysis paralysis award, and we really should call it the Ferrari joke award.
We're gonna memorialize these things. We're gonna have the
Yes.
Yuki Tsunoda pylon for P11 that we're gonna craft, and then we're gonna have the analysis paralysis, i.e., what did Ferrari do wrong today award that we're gonna give out at the end of the show because, oh my God! So Cody, tell us what you saw.
This one, you had Lewis Hamilton catch up to Charles Leclerc on significantly better pace. Charles Leclerc coming to, a time when he's going to be pitting very soon because he's on worn tires. They're on different strategies. And Lewis Hamilton, you're on the same team, right? So when you're on, like, the George Russell thing was a little different, I feel like, because it's the end of the race and, he had the opportunity to defend that position, I feel like. With Ferrari, though, it's like you're on completely different strategies at that point, and Lewis is coming up. It makes sense to say, hey, Charles, he's on a different strategy. We don't want to lose time. Let him by. And what happened is you've got Lewis Hamilton getting frustrated over the radio saying, hey, can we swap positions? And Ferrari doesn't do that. In fact, they don't even tell Leclerc what's going on. We found out after the fact because it almost painted a picture like Leclerc was being a dick for a while there.
Well, that's what Fom wanted you to think.
Yeah, that's what they wanted you to think. And yeah, it looked like he was maybe being a dick to Lewis, trying to hold him up or whatever. But that is not what happened. Ferrari never gave him the call to swap places.
They gave him
they just called him into the pit eventually. And Lewis was like, thanks, guys, for that. Like, you're just screwing me over by not making a decision.
It's even worse if you listen to the Leclerc exclusive radio because the order comes, Leclerc questions it, the engineer says, we'll get back to you, and 25 seconds of silence happens. So by the time they call him to box, he's almost past the point of no return and has no choice but to stay out. Had he tried to come in when the radio call happened, he would have, 1, had to hear it, 2, understand it, and 3, react to it. It may have been one of those he doesn't make the cone, and Lord only knows what happens then at that point. So he goes around
Mhm.
again and then eventually comes into the pits and boxes the car. That frees Hamilton up. That happened a whole lap and a half too late. The call to Leclerc happened 30 seconds too late. And then the response after the Leclerc question happened another 30 seconds too late. What is going on in that sequence? Is it going up a chain, down a chain? Who's making the decision? Somebody has to make a decision there. And
Mhm.
it always kind of felt like and we've seen this again in other teams. I'm not taking look. McLaren have done the same type of crap before, trying to figure their shit out too. But it's obviously a contagious thing because it was like, who's running the show? What strategy are we doing? Are we trying to get the most for the team, or are we prioritizing an individual driver? You got to have that kind of worked out before you go into the race, especially when you split strategies the way that you did. And all it caused was chaos, and it didn't work for either of them at the end of the day. Lewis doesn't get the podium. Now, it's because of that virtual safety car. He probably would have, but doesn't happen. And Ferrari, by all estimation, at least on race pace, we're probably the quickest car, but come home fourth and fifth because of it. So you have to look at this as very much a self-inflicted wound all the way around, any way you slice it.
Yeah, I agree. It seems like Ferrari's trying to decide everything by committee. And in the world of Formula One, where everything happens very fast, you just don't have the time to do that. You gotta pick someone and say you're in charge. And when it comes to making those decisions, you look at that person and you tell them, "I need a decision right now," and they do it.
Yeah.
That's my fix for it, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, just know what it is that you're doing, and you have so much good equipment. For God's sakes, like, if you have to take the headset off and yell at the other side to tell them what to do, that's what you
Mhm.
go do. But again, I don't work for them. I don't understand it. It was a very odd situation all the way around. But lastly, just, me as a Lando fan, it's good to see him do that. It was good to see. Like, I thought, like, it was interesting. There was, even when he wasn't in the lead, he was keeping Kimi Antonelli honest throughout it. Antonelli never really shook him. It never got really beyond a couple of seconds. And it was probably one of Lando's better, I think, other than the start, pretty much a complete drive all the way around for him. What does that potentially do to getting back in a championship fight? We're going to look at the points, and then I will kind of share my thoughts. It always just seems that Monza becomes that inflection point, no matter where you want, how you slice it. Monza is an inflection point. And we're going to have basically two paths, I think, for the rest of this season. And Monza's a track that McLaren sometimes struggle in. I'm not going to lie about it. It's got the straights. It's not their main strength. Their strength is in the high-speed twisty bits, and there's really not a whole lot of that in Monza. But if somehow, some way, Lando can outscore Kimi, whether it's for a win or whether it's just a significant point margin because Kimi is taking a grid penalty, I think that's already all but been announced,
Yep.
for the next race in Monza. If Lando can get this going, it's one sort of narrative, basically, that maybe there's an odd chance of a championship fight for the rest of this season. If McLaren do what they always tend to do in Monza, which is somehow find a way to let their opponents wiggle off the hook, it's just going to be about winning races, and more than likely, Kimi Antonelli is going to be your driver's world champion. Because at least now we see some competition in it. McLaren obviously have put a lot of work into that car. It's definitely working on the Lando side. We still have to get, in my opinion, some help to Piastri to kind of refine the racecraft a little bit. But the car's there. I mean, it can do it. It definitely does it over one lap. We've seen both drivers been able to do it over one lap. So where we go is going to be like, I hate to say that the whole championship is going to probably come down to next week or 2 weeks from now, but it probably very well could be. I hate to sound over dramatic, but that's just the math more than anything else to see. So stay tuned. Next weekend will be interesting, or next race will be interesting for sure. All right, Cody, any final thoughts on the Dutch GP?
No, there's just that I guess it was a little more exciting than I thought it was going to be. I honestly thought this was going to be a little bit of a stinker because of the notoriety with it being difficult to pass. But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised, and let's hope we can keep that pleasant surprise going for Monza.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fitting end and a good curtain call for a venue that's not going to be back for at least a little bit. I hope. You never know what's going to happen. You hope that somebody wants to throw some money at it and maybe get going again. But the Dutch fans, the whole time that this circuit has been back in the modern era, have equated themselves very well. They're very fun to watch, even when there's been delays. I think sometimes that's where they shine because I've seen more dance routines in a whole section of fandom than I have anywhere else. So good on you, Zandvoort, Circuit Zandvoort. A fitting farewell if this is the last time we're going to talk about this track for a bit. All right. Well, that is your Dutch GP. We're going to take a quick break. We'll re-rack. We'll come back. We will decant what this did to all of the driver standings. We'll tell you where the new points sit in the constructors. We'll then open it up to your takes on the weekend, the fan email segment. Got our contributors here. And we've got some updates on one of them who I wanted to make sure I gave a shout out to. And then we'll hand out our awards. Whether we're memorializing them or not, but we're going to hand out our awards, and then we'll talk a little bit about predictions, and then we'll start to preview what may very well be the championship decider race of this season in Monza in a couple of weeks' time. Come on back. You will not want to miss it.
You are listening to the Outlap F1 podcast, and we'll be right back after this quick pit stop. Grab your flu powder, broomstick, or apparate to your favorite audio streaming service to join the discussion on Hogwarts, a podcast, where Dan and his friends have in-depth chapter-by-chapter breakdowns of each Harry Potter novel. Join the group as they dive into the magical world and discuss plot points, analyze character development, and occasionally go off the rails. Whether you're a muggle who's new to the series or a pure-blood wizard who won't need a remember-all, Hogwarts, a podcast, brings everyone to the Great Hall for a magical discussion. Hogwarts, a podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back on in, everybody. This is Season 8, episode number 20 of the Outlap F1 podcast. It's our 2026 Dutch, for the last time for a little bit, GP review show. We've got Andy. I'm along with Cody tonight. We just wrapped up a lot of running. There's a lot of sessions over the course of the weekend. But what did all of that do to the points? Cody, if you take the top 10 in the drivers, I will take the teams.
All right. So our top 10 in the driver standings following the Dutch Grand Prix, we still have Kimi Antonelli out in front for Mercedes with an even bigger lead than he had before since he finished in front of George Russell. He is sitting at 242 points. George Russell, however, moves back up into second place because he gets the place on tiebreaker. He is at 183 points in second place, just ahead of Lewis Hamilton, also on 183 points. Fourth place, Lando Norris, getting maximum points, at least in the Grand Prix. For McLaren, he's up to 159 points, and you really got to wonder where he might be had they not had so many reliability issues at the beginning of the season. But what's done is done.
China.
Charles Leclerc, fifth place for Ferrari at 155 points. So I believe he got overtaken by Lando Norris after this race.
Yep.
Max Verstappen getting no points in the Grand Prix. So just a couple points, I think, from the sprint is all he gets this weekend. Max Verstappen, sixth place for Red Bull at 112 points. Oscar Piastri behind him in seventh place for McLaren at 104 points. Isaac Hadjar holding on to eighth place, though he did not participate in this race weekend. For Red Bull Racing, Isaac Hadjar is at 68 points. And Liam Lawson in ninth place, at least for the moment, with Red Bull Racing, is how we've got him marked down for the moment. He does get some points out of this weekend, so he's up to 49. And then in 10th place, Pierre Gasly. It keeps feeling weird that Pierre Gasly just kind of keeps sneaking into the points this season. He did actually finish in 10th place in the Grand Prix here and get a point. So Pierre Gasly wraps up the top 10 for Alpine with 44 points.
All right, your team standings largely unchanged in terms of overall running, but some of the gaps are a little bit tighter at least. P1, however, is Mercedes, a very solid day for them. P2 and P3 on the day. Put them up to 425 points. Very well clear of P2 Ferrari, who check in with 338. P3, It's going to be a bit of a stretch if McLaren can get out of that P3 spot, although they do now have a car that is now capable of winning races, as we've seen that now. They're up to 263 points on the season. P4 remains Red Bull Racing. They check in with 186. P5 is Racing Bulls on 66 points. P6 is Alpine. Very respectable here at 63 points. P7 is Haas. Points are going to be on pretty a rare thing unless they can put some real developments into that car, man. But they remain on 21 points. P8 is Audi. Significant points for Hulkenberg coming home where he did. Gets them up to 16 points. P9 is Williams, who remain on 11 after both drivers took each other out. P10, the biggest mover here in the down markers. They've tripled their point haul. Aston Martin up to 3 points, all on the strength of Fernando Alonso this season. Now 3 points clear of P11 Cadillac, who have yet to score in Formula One. All right. Well, you've heard our takes on the Dutch GP and all of the team order messes that happened between both the Mercedes and the Ferrari. It definitely must have been a very interesting debrief. I would have loved to have seen the little spy camera on the table just to hear some of that discourse, but sadly not. But it is now time for what you guys thought on the weekend. It's the fan email segment. We start, as we always are apt to do, with Rachel Fleming, who has delivered another banger of an email. Cody, what she got to say?
All right. First email's from Rachel. Thank you, Rachel. And she says, well, nothing has changed since the summer break. 2 wins in a row for Lando. He was my driver of the day and was excellent. A world champion drive. I agree with that. That Max Verstappen crash was very scary. I am so glad he walked away from it. I'm glad Liam did well as well and got some points, a point to prove, and I think he proved it. Oh, and dear Williams, if I was James Vowles, I would be doing a Gunter. The first rule is to not hit your teammate. Daft. Very, very British lingo there. We don't really say daft very much over here. Sorry to lose the Dutch Grand Prix since the Max domination has ended. It has grown on me, and it's a shame we lose another European race. Audi Watch, well, that was a terrifying start with the spin from board and nearly collecting Hulkenberg, but Hulk recovered with a good points finish. Perez Watch, well, it looks like the brakes stayed intact, and he finished the race, so it's not all bad. And finally, Alonso Watch, genuine, deserved, not caused by half the grid falling off points. 2 of them. I was hugely disappointed in quality with the upgrade by Honda, but Alonso had a brilliant race and the strategy worked really well. And the last point Rachel has is finally, Lando couldn't. Could he? I guess I'll start with that last point because I was very against Lando's championship hopes at the beginning of this episode, and I'm kind of still sticking to that. I do think McLaren has shown that they really have something good going, and they have a shot at least because they've won 2 races in a row and they've looked very competitive. But as I said before, you kind of have to look back to like the 2024 championship for comparison because that was kind of the same deal. You know, in that season, you had Max win a whole bunch of races in the first third of the season. You made this huge lead, and McLaren, despite having the better car for the rest of the season, and the fact that Max wasn't winning races anymore until we got very close to the end of the year, Lando was not able to close up that points deficit. Now, he does have the confidence of being champion behind him now, and it isn't an insurmountable points gap, but it would be pretty wild. We're halfway through the season here. Kimi Antonelli is more than 2 races, 2 Grand Prix clear. So you're going to really need something to happen where Kimi Antonelli doesn't finish the race and Lando comes away with the win to really start making that a possibility. And we've seen that happen plenty of times. We've had, 2 non-points finishes due to reliability issues from Kimi. So it's possible. You also have to look at that Kimi has been rock solid and has finished on the podium every time he hasn't had a car problem.
Yeah.
And, we had McLaren spend the first several race weekends with did not starts. So, yeah, they have a pretty big gap to overhaul. It is possible, but it's going to take something wild to happen to make it a more distinct possibility.
Yeah, I mean, the one scenario that I read was fairly telling, and I think this was from a very Lando favorable fan group that said something to the effect of, if Lando wins out, which is not a given, and I don't think that's going to happen. I would be shocked if that actually happened. Lando would have to win out. Kimi would have to finish second in all but one race. And then in the race that he doesn't finish second, he'd have to finish lower than fifth. That would be a path. A path, not the path. So it's a ways to go. But I will say it's going to come down probably to the next race. If we're actually going to have any sort of real the other thing that's Lando's got against him, he's got to catch and pass both George and Lewis. So he's got three guys that he's got to be constantly outscoring just to get into position to challenge Kimi.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big ask. It's a really big ask. And as I've said before, Hungary, McLaren always seem to go really well. Zandvoort, in the modern era, at least in this iteration of it, McLaren, other than the first race that they were here, have gone really well. It's a track that suits the car. They've figured out how to at least get the high-speed corner dominance from their 2025 package over to this car now. That's great. Monza doesn't have any of it. Monza has long straights and slow chicanes, both things that the McLaren car are really not good in. So if they're going to do it, they're going to have to do it the hard way. And there's a lot of other tracks that have long straights. Circuit of the Americas, another one that McLarens have struggle busts in year after year. Want to know? I got the receipts to back it up, because every year I go, something bad happens to one of them. It always just seems to happen that way. And then in the sprint last year, they took each other out. So, all of that. So yeah, it's a big ask. Would I love to see a championship fight? Of course I would. Am I all up for that and to cover all that? You're damn right I'm ready to cover all that. But I'm not even counting it until it gets within 60. And he's got a ways to go just to even get there. So I'm putting that firmly on my back burner, and I'm as big of a Lando fan as you're going to find.
We did pretty much touch on just about everything else in here. We're all very happy for Fernando Alonso.
Yes.
Hopefully boosting his expectations to stay in the sport at least one more year. I guess I am happy that at least one of the Cadillacs finished. That is progress. Yep, always good to see Hulkenberg getting points. And yeah, I'm gonna be disappointed to see the Dutch Grand Prix go, because it's cool to see him racing effectively on the beach dunes, and it's very fun to see all the passionate fan base out there and all of their orange, and it's a big fan base there. So
yeah,
I am sad to see it go, but it might be back some point down the line.
All it takes is somebody with rich pockets to come in and think that they can make money. And it's astounding to me that they pack the house every year and yet they can't make money. Something's wrong about that. And whether you want to put that on the contract the FOM makes you sign just to get the cars to your venue is a discussion maybe for another day. But it does suck that it cost the Dutch Grand Prix here for sure.
I agree. Thank you again, Rachel, for your email. Our next one comes in from Dave Doherty. Thank you, Dave. And he says, "Hi, Outlap. Where do I start? First of all, I want to say I'm going to miss this track. It's fun to race and drive on the F1 game, and thankfully, it's kind of saved on the F1 sims on certain copies. Second of all, how lucky was Verstappen and Hulkenberg on not taking out the pack during the crashes on the first lap? Very lucky. Nice to see Lawson earning some respect on that drive. Alonso had a simply lovely race, but for Max, it wasn't that simply lovely for him. And lastly, we've got, but for McLaren, they are coming back on the scene to be the top. They kind of have Mercedes DNA, shadows of when to strike. So, yeah, we pretty much talked about how we're feeling about McLaren's chances. Now, I do think they have a very good chance of winning many more races throughout the rest of the season. And kind of something that I've been hearing going around a lot lately, and F1 media is that I guess Mercedes has claimed, or at least Toto Wolff has claimed, that they don't really have any money left to continue upgrading the car this year. Now, who knows if that is something real or it's just Toto blowing smoke out of his ass. But if that is actually the case, and they've already spent everything on getting the Mercedes to where it's at right now, we just saw McLaren bring more upgrades to the car. So, yeah, if that is the truth for Mercedes, then they really might not go any, too much farther forward. Now, that might not matter too much because George Russell still won the sprint race and got the sprint pole, and they were in the running and during the Grand Prix. So if this is the best they've got to offer for the rest of the season, it's still a pretty damn good package. But yeah, I definitely think we're still going to see, maybe some more wins from McLaren, but a tough mountain to climb for the championship. Yep. Also very happy for Alonso. Disappointed in Max, but also happy he's not hurt. Happy he's sticking around at Red Bull and for the foreseeable future. We haven't really talked too much about Lawson here, but he, in my opinion, pretty much did the same as Tsunoda in terms of doing what he needed to do to try to defend his future in racing, even if it's not Formula One.
Yeah.
Because, we saw Tsunoda come in here and show that he's still got it and he's still a good racing driver and he can come in when it's tough and make things happen. And we saw the same thing out of Lawson. He struggled a little bit during the sprint section of the weekend, keeping up with even the Racing Bulls car, which we all know so far is a pretty competitive midfield car and seemingly easier to handle than the Red Bull. It's kind of the theme for Red Bull, I think, is goes fast, hard to drive. But he did improve throughout the weekend. And while he isn't quite onto the pace of the rest of the front runners, and I think he probably should have been closer to the rest of those guys, for just coming into this car on a sprint weekend, I think he did well. And if that means that, someday he gets pushed out of the Red Bull family to make room for, Solov or whoever's the next up and coming guy, I think he has shown that he still could make a future for himself in Formula One. And if not that, in some other great racing series. So he did what he needed to do.
Yeah. I mean, he's definitely a viable candidate in a lot of places. Hot rumor that I keep hearing is Tsunoda is going to come stateside and possibly go race an IndyCar. There's some open seats at some potentially pretty competitive teams. And I think he would just fit in culturally very well with the IndyCar guys who like to cuss and swear and fight each other all over the place. So he'll fit right in. So come on over if you want to, Yuki. It'd be fun.
Honestly, it would be a great time to come over to IndyCar because, frankly, IndyCar has been very exciting lately, despite the fact that Alex Palou is still going to win everything and win his 5th championship and his 4th consecutive. Jesus Christ, he's really dominating IndyCar, but it is really exciting to watch. And we've got that new IndyCar chassis coming.
Yeah,
in just a couple of years here. And I'll tell you, man, it's pretty exciting. It looks really cool. Not too much different than the current car, but a little sleeker, a little better put together, and it supposedly goes significantly faster. They're showing, I think I watched a simulation of comparing the existing chassis to the new chassis over, I think they did it on a sim for Road America, and the new car was like, I want to say it was like 4 seconds a lap faster or something like that. It was a significant difference.
Yeah.
So, if that is the case, we've got
good
really
time
good things
to come over.
Yep.
I mean, it's finally not to go off on an IndyCar tangent, but it's not going to be a Frankenstein car anymore. It's not going to be a chassis that's got an aero screen on it that was never designed for it. And now you're going to integrate the aero screen. You're going to integrate all the aero so that it works together and not separate from each other. My God, what a concept. Why did it take 12 years to get here? I'll just be happy that we get here. And why do we have to wait another year? That's another rant for a different time. Anyway, back to
we could get into that. I had the same thought, but we'll save that one for another podcast.
It's a different podcast.
Thank you again, Dave, for your email. Our last one comes in tonight from the Formula. Thank you, Mr. Formula. And his is short and sweet, and I love it. Roses are red, violets are blue. Williams sure sucks, but Fernando scored 2. Yes, it's wonderful. Very, very well thought out. So, and it hits the nail on the head. Williams really kind of screwed themselves over this weekend, especially. Well, I mean, the drivers screwed themselves over, but Williams has kind of screwed themselves with having probably the next to Aston Martin the biggest disappointment this season for their car. I really hope that they're able to turn it around for next year. I really hope Aston Martin's able to turn around for next year too, because Alex Albon, Carlos Sainz, Fernando Alonso, even on some days Lance Stroll, they're all very, very good drivers, and they deserve to have better cars to compete.
They deserve a shot at something. I mean,
exactly.
It sucks that we're celebrating Fernando Alonso in P9. For a driver of his caliber, it feels weird to be celebrating that, but you almost have to, because he did do a great drive just to get that Aston Martin car up there. But
it feels like it feels like a lifetime ago, even though it's only 3 years ago, that Fernando Alonso was finishing on the podium regularly with Aston Martin and almost looking like he could win the Monaco Grand Prix. And we were all so excited for the future, and it never really panned out that way. At least not yet.
But, youth springs eternal, apparently, sometimes for some guys. And he's just one of those kind of unicorns that is probably going to do it until his body tells him he can't. And he's obviously keeping in shape. And I've never heard that he's fighting through injuries or any of the other stuff other than when the car was vibrating. So good on Fernando, and may his reign live, I guess, over the sport. Anyway, just also wanted to take a special shout out to Mr. Formula and let everybody know that he is okay. He was in one of the awful, awful zones that got affected by some of the tornadoes in Illinois and Wisconsin. Have both got nailed with way too much weather for one season, more than enough than I would ever want to deal with ever again. But everybody's okay, and he's good. And when we were going into the break, it had just kind of happened, and I was actually quite a little concerned. But he did respond to me through a DM and said he's okay. His family was okay. So, that's always the best thing. So good news for Mr. Formula. Continue to contribute. We like hearing from you always. All right. So we will move into our awards, and we will start, as we are always apt to do, with the rubbish. Cody, yours is short and sweet, so I'll let you go first. What you got?
Yeah, my rubbish award is Max. Why? He always pushes so hard, and it's like you're pushing so hard on the very first lap when it's wet. Like maybe take it easy just a little bit. I don't know, but I guess he wouldn't be Max Verstappen if he didn't push it really hard all the time. Sometimes shit happens, I guess, but still very disappointing. And I just hope he bounces back in Monza. Maybe they'll do what they did last year, and they'll just more or less take the back wing off the car. And
no, they're going to open the hole more. You can't take the back wing off of these. You can just open the hole more.
There you go. Just open it completely.
Just have it open all the time.
That opening is so big on the straight mode for the Red Bull. I think if they were going to make it any bigger, they might as well just take off the flippy flap. So, but we'll see what they come up with.
Yeah. So I have two rubbishes. One is the on track. This one's was easy for me, and that is the Williams taking each other out. That was a new one. Ugh. Off track. And this was a story that probably didn't get a lot of pub. And it's one of those annoying things that I continue to see, and I don't get why it doesn't get more traction, because we've talked a lot about the FIA and how Mohammed Ben Sulayem has consolidated power. A few weeks ago, he came up with the rule that he was going to take off the term limits and basically anoint himself a king. And we've all just stood by and watched him do it. And one of the things that now he's doing with his kingly powers is apparently he's telling you that the Ukraine war is over and Russian flag drivers can now compete in FIA certified events again. What's changed? What in the world has changed other than your status and your ability to do this that now, and it's not nothing against the drivers, but that sanction exists for a reason, because that president likes big shiny things, just kind of like the guy here. And we were taking away some of his big shiny trophies in order to make a point. And now we're not making a point. And it's weird. And yet that conflict continues to happen. And we're just going to stand by and say, okay, because we can't do anything about it because we took all the term limits away. Oi.
Yeah, I don't know really what to add to that other than it just kind of blows. And you really kind of like to think of sporting in general as something that kind of unites everybody, because everybody just likes watching a game of soccer or an auto race or something like that. It doesn't really matter where you're from. Everybody likes their sports. But so, I kind of like it when we're able to keep sports and politics separate, but you can't always do that. I think Formula One was in the right, as was a lot of other sporting of, bodies, to put those sanctions on in the first place. And yeah, like you said, the sanctions are now gone, but the issue is not. So it feels very artificial.
Yeah. So again, I don't know that it's going to, a rant of me is going to do anything about it, but it was just annoying. And this is where I can put it. And it's half my show. So there you go. All right. We'll move on to analysis paralysis. I'll go first with this one. And mine is leaving Charles Leclerc with a busy signal halfway, hanging on the radio for 35 or 25 seconds or whatever it was. That was a new one. I did not expect that to show up in the middle of the Dutch Grand Prix, yet it did. And it kind of annoyed me that FOM, I think to your point, you said this earlier, was trying to make Charles look like the bad guy. Charles wasn't the bad guy. He was going, what do you want me to do? And nobody was telling him. So, yeah, Ferrari right into the analysis paralysis award for me. Cody, what you got?
I'm going to go ahead and broaden that to both Ferrari and Mercedes for their driver swaps shenanigans. Ferrari's definitely had more of the classic paralysis part of the analysis paralysis, with not being able to make any decisions that they needed to in a short amount of time. Whereas for Mercedes, I think it kind of goes more to, why are you even doing this in the first place? It really doesn't make sense in this situation. All you're going to do is just continue to potentially alienate one of your drivers, who I would say is not a number, he's not a number 2 driver. George Russell is, frustrating sometimes, but he is a high quality driver, and maybe not this season, but I think he's, every bit as good to compete for the championship. And you're kind of telling him no, and you're maybe doing that a little too early.
Fair enough. Fair points all the way around. All right. We will move to our dark horse of the day. I'll go first with this one. If I'm going to throw Aston Martin in the rubbish bin, and Lord knows we've done that, you got to give them their platitudes when something good for them happens. And Fernando Alonso tripling the Aston Martin points haul on the season, I think, is notable. Good for him. Feel good story. Feel good radio occasionally, which you actually heard. And they didn't broadcast it on the main feed, which was also frustrating. But anyway, regardless of all that, good enough for Fernando Alonso to get some points on what has been a very frustrating season for sure. Cody, what's your thought here for Dark Horse?
I'm going to give Dark Horse to Yuki Tsunoda. I did not really have any expectations for him going into this weekend, and he didn't score any points, but he did resume his stake on 11th place, and he did finish ahead of his teammate, Arvid Lindblad, who does have half a season under his belt in this car. So I find that to be quite impressive. Good on you, Yuki.
All right, very good. So for driver of the day, I think we've got consensus here. I'm going with my homeboy, Lando, for doing it in his, I guess it's just his style. Yeah, we always mug the start. We keep him honest. We get him around the pit stops. And he did an overcut that, quite frankly, not a lot of people thought he was going to be able to do, considering he was on the hardest compounded tire. And the 7 laps he did after Antonelli boxed and after Antonelli came out, I think the delta was only like 0.3. And it was those laps that basically won him this race. So good on you for Lando for doing that. Cody, your thoughts here?
Yeah, it's not exciting if he doesn't make you sweat a little.
That's true.
But yeah, I got to give it to Lando Norris as well. He did come into this after the summer break and continue where he left off, bringing home the Grand Prix win, getting on pole position, and keeping the season entertaining, not letting Mercedes just waltz away and win every race. It kind of seemed like after the first, what is it, like 6 or 7 races, it kind of seemed like that might happen where Mercedes could win, almost every race. And now we're really seeing, at least in this part of the season, that is not the case. I mean, Kimi Antonelli has still been driving very well, but he's only won, I think, 1 out of the last 6 races. Considering he won 5 in a row at one point, that's definitely quite the change. So at least, it could be a very exciting and kind of turbulent season from here on out.
Yeah, I will say one thing. If you are a Kimi Antonelli fan, and I know we have some out there who do listen to the show, lean on your points. Lean on your points lead. You've earned it. That's why it's there. Keep doing what you're doing, and the math is going to win for you, because if your bad days are P2 and P3, there's right now really only one guy or 2 guys who can kind of catch you. So, just kind of keep doing what you're doing, and you'll be fine, young man. All right. So before we head on out, we will talk a little bit about our predictions and the prediction results. Cody, you got 2 points on the weekend. You got the fastest lap, and you got the prop bet because you said Liam Lawson was going to do the best of the Red Bull subs. So you got all that. I got 4 points on the weekend. I got the pole time because I was slower than you. I got P1 on the podium because I predicted Lando for that. I got P5 bonus pick and P7 bonus pick. So those were how I ended up taking the
pretty
win
good for the picks
this weekend. I think now I'm up to 3-1-2. I think is kind of the record, because we've had a few draws.
Yeah,
in there.
I think you're right.
So I'm pretty sure that's where we are now as we move forward into the second half of the season. So lots to play for in our predictions game for sure. All right. Well, we have 1 week off before what may be the most important race for the championship this season. Monza, the one that we're all scared to death of to race on these cars. Here we go. So get your social media ready. I'm sure Twitter is going to be a nice, lovely place with a lovely, polite discourse about all of this. Yeah, right. Just remember, if you're pissed off about what you see in Monza, you've already won the argument. They're changing the regulations. They just have signed contracts that they have to get to the end of, and then we're not going to have to do this anymore. So it will come back to being the great venue that it is. The Italians will be fine, and they will be rooting for their asses off for Ferrari, as they always do, regardless of whether they're fast, slow, or wherever. The Tifosi will be out in full force, I am sure. The podium will still be great. Monza will still be fine. We'll all get through it, folks. I guarantee you. Cody, any final thoughts?
Just that no matter how Ferrari is doing throughout the rest of the season, they do always seem to pull out all the stops and do well for their Tifosi in Italy. I think we're going to see some of that next week. I would not be surprised if Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc eat their Wheaties in the morning and put some rocket fuel in the tank and end up competing for the win. At least that's what I'm hoping is going to happen.
We shall see. It is in 2 weeks' time. There will be lots of stories to come probably before then. Stick with our social media. If anything big breaks, we will obviously continue to bring it to you. Until then, take care of each other. It's a crazy world, man. For Cody, it's been Andy. And as always, may all your laps be fast.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Outlap F1 podcast. If you like what you heard, click that subscribe button and be sure to leave us a 5-star review. If you want to connect with us outside of the show, check out our website at www.outlapf1.com. Find us on Twitter and Instagram at outlapf1podcast, or email us at chatnow@outlapf1.com. As always, thank you so much for your support, and we'll see you on the next one.